Global practices. We will in a minute look at the different global practices across the world and how bilingual education takes up different forms. Now, before we do that, we are again reiterating the point that bilingual education needs to be reimagined so that it is able to pick up the challenges of the 21st century and it caters to the needs of the multilingual children. So we need to continuously reassess what we are doing and whether it is relevant to our children anymore or not. Now we need to, as we said before, connect the concept of bilingual education or multilingual education, which it might be called in certain contexts, with the concept of multilingual and multimodal literacy. That is, literacy is learned in different mediums and in different languages. So it is not necessary to restrict children to a single language, but to accept what they know outside the classrooms and so as to connect with what they are learning inside the classrooms with what they already know outside the classrooms. We need to accept this concept of multimodal literacy and multilingual literacy. So bilingual education takes up different forms. There might be like two different languages introduced for different subjects. You have that in Pakistan now in public schools also, where they use English, for instance, in some of the public schools where you use English for math and science, and other subjects might be taught in Urdu or some other language. Bilingualism at times might also be provided. Bilingual education might be given to the students in a mode where the same subject might be taught in multiple languages. Now, this can be in a way that in early stages one language is used and then at a later stage a different language is used. Again, in some parts of Pakistan, you have, for instance, mathematics in Urdu, and later on as they pick up the language and they reach class 4 or 5, then there is a transition from one language to the other. It might also be possible to use the two languages for the same subjects at the same stage, and this effectively, more or less, this does happen even in English medium schools, where you see that the children are holding English language or English text, but the teacher might be explaining the text in Urdu. Now, other forms, for instance, European Commission uses the term multilingual education, and over here it encourages to use a mother tongue and then plus 2 other languages. So they would prefer that the students who get this education in Europe know their mother tongue, learn in their mother tongue, plus they should need to also learn 2 other languages. You have UNESCO also, because these international organizations, these global agendas are affecting national policies also. So in 1999, UNESCO passed a resolution in which it emphasized the learning of the mother tongue, the regional language and the national language. Over here also you find that there is an emphasis on 3 languages. There is a critique of bilingual education, and states generally do not approve of bilingual education because they think that if you give the education in to the children in their home languages, then it creates what they call ethno-linguistic enclaves, that it does not enable the students or the learners to participate in the wider social life. So they become sort of like limited to their own communities. So in US, bilingual education is again blamed for Ghettoization of the Latinos. That is something like they it holds the Latinos back and does not enable the children to progress enough. And again, it is also critiqued that although certain languages are chosen to be taught in bilingual education, there is a lack of attention to other languages, and only some languages are selected for bilingual educational purposes. It is said that yes, if you use bilingual education for a certain sect or certain class, then it stratifies the society. Like in Pakistan, there's this concept of Urdu medium education and English medium education. There is also the question of state language and identity. So if everyone is learning in their home languages, what about state identity? What about the national language? What do we do with it? And however, if we think about it, the same can be the reasons for expanding bilingual education. So it is argued that yes, because of this flow of immigration across the states in US and in other parts of the world, people might be a bit worried about the bilingual education, and just because the states work with integration, they need to maintain their identity as nations. And that is why in the state of California and Arizona in US, bilingual education has actually been banned. And what they say is that only transitional programs will be allowed. That is, once the children have learned the language, they need to move on to the main language. Now, there are political implications for it. So bilingual education is somehow related to poorer education or education for a lower sect. And now what other terms are coming up are content integrated language learning. This is what is this term is also being used. And then, of course, there is always the thing to keep in mind that no matter what we do, not all languages can come into education. It will always be the languages in power that find their way in bilingual education also.